Hello, you're welcome to this session of our training on project writing, basically research methodology in economics and related disciplines, including management and other social science courses. For those of you who have been following us, you would have seen how we treated chapter 1 and chapter 2. If you have not seen that, the link is provided in this video. At this point, we want to look at a very critical section of project writing, and that has to do with the research method you are going to use. Now, in economics, there are basically two broad areas in terms of methodology. There is an area for time series analysis, and there is another for cross-sectional analysis. So it's going to be difficult putting all of them together in one piece, and that is why in this session we are focusing on time series analysis. All right, we just want to show you the basics from where you can build the skills. In another session, we'll be looking at cross-sectional analysis. The link is also provided here. All right, and so the question has always been, which research method should be used? To answer this question, it has a lot to do with the objective of your research. The objective of your research is very important because it determines the nature of the data you will use. Okay? So, two key things are considered. One is the objective of the research, and then the data that you will use to achieve that objective. And in terms of data, we have two broad areas, as I mentioned earlier. One of them is time series analysis, and then the other one is cross-sectional analysis. We are not treating these two areas in this session. We have video on types of data used in research. You may want to check it out in our playlists. But then time series analysis basically has to do with data collected over time, whereas cross-sectional data analysis is data collected within an interval. Now, there are other areas, other types of data available, but virtually all of them are drawn from these two broad areas. When you talk about panel data, pool data, and all of that, these are derivatives from time series analysis or cross-sectional data analysis. Now, we want to focus on cross-sectional time series analysis in this session, and what is presented here is a basic structure expected in your time series analysis. Your project that requires time series analysis, this is a basic structure expected. I encourage you to verify what your institution needs, because many departments have their own requirements. All right, so anywhere you go to do a research or a study, find out the requirements of the department and follow that structure. But many of them we have to do with this basic structure. In other words, you talk about the theoretical literature review, you look at then you look at the model specification, you look at the estimation techniques, you look at the method of result evaluation, and then description of the variables and the source of your data. These are the 5 basic structures expected in your research method. We're going to take each of them and discuss briefly, and that will be all in this session. The first one is theoretical framework. A lot of people confuse theoretical framework with conceptual framework, and that is why I want to quickly clear that confusion here. Conceptual framework basically helps you. What you try to do there is to identify the core variables in the objective. You look at the objective and try to identify the variables of interest. If, for instance, I'm looking at the effect of effect of credit facility on small scale industries. Credit facilities on small scale industry. So credit facility is what I'm looking at, and then we have small scale industry, which is the dependent variable, whereas credit facility is the independent variable. So what is the relationship between this credit facility and the independent variable? You try to identify the core variables and then map out that interaction. In most cases, this is done graphically. You present it like a graph so that somebody look at that framework, we see the interaction between the variables. That is what we basically do in conceptual framework. Whereas theoretical framework require that you provide a theoretical background to the work you want to do, a theoretical background that supports that framework you are looking at. All right. In most cases, conceptual framework appear in your literature review, and then there is another one that looks like theoretical framework that people confuse a lot: theoretical literature review. Now, if you have structured that concept, then you do your theoretical literature review. These are largely done in your chapter 2, theoretical literature review. Maybe I've reviewed 5 theories related to my study. In my chapter 3 or thereabout, where I do my research method, I will now extract one of those 5 theories, the one that suits most or that describes the variables, the interaction I want to capture in my model. I will extract that one. I reviewed 5 theories in my literature review, but now in my chapter 3, one of those theories I reviewed, the one that gives a picture of what model I want to use, is the one I will now pick up and present as my theoretical framework for the model. So the theoretical framework is actually referring to what supports the model. From where did you derive the model you are using in the analysis? All right. Now let me show you an example of what conceptual framework looks like. In this case, someone is looking at the results score, examination score of students, and you want to see how the, which is the dependent variable, and you want to see how the hours of study affect exam scores. In this particular structures, the person decided to extract the fact that the number of practices this student have done also affect exam score, and that is what we call mediator variables. Okay, so and of course the hour of practice is part of the hour of study. Okay, so this gives a picture what this person is looking at. You are looking at the hour of study, how it affects examination score, but you recognize the fact that there is mediator variable somewhere. So this is typically a conceptual framework. Now, theoretical framework, I decided to extract something one of my MSc students did. Very beautifully structured theoretical framework. Like I mentioned earlier, theoretical framework helps the researcher to design and conduct their research in a way that it gives you a background to interpret the result. That this is what this theory has suspected, that these variables have this kind of relationship. So when you have done your research, you are interpreting in reference to that theory too, to see whether it agrees with it or there is it deviates from that particular theory. So look at what my student captured somewhere in one of his theses. He said the theoretical underpinning of this study is anchored on dependency economic theory proposed by somebody, popularized by another person. That this theory forms the basic of this research he's doing. And he reflected the fact that this theory had been highlighted in the previous chapter, which happens to be chapter 2. So this kind of discussion, so you are not expected to begin to discuss that theory in full. when you are looking at theoretical framework. You should have discussed it in your literature review. And then in your chapter 3 or whatever chapter where you do your methodology, you now refer to that particular theory and pull it up to say this is the theory on the basis from where I am drawing my model. And that is your theoretical framework. I hope that is clear enough now. I do hope you will not run into that confusion again. Okay, so we are looking at the structure we mentioned in chapter 3 for time series analysis, and we identified theoretical framework, model specification, estimation techniques, method of result evaluation, description of variables. So we have treated theoretical framework. Let's quickly run through the rest, which is the next one is your model specification. In your model specification, you expected, now you have given us the theoretical framework. If, for instance, I'm using national income identity as my theoretical framework, for example, and national income identity specifies that national income is a function of government expenditure, consumption, investment, and net foreign trade. Okay, now if I have presented that discussion and I am studying the effect of government expenditure on income, I could now I will state that mathematical form, okay, the functional form in national income identity. After stating it, I will now extract the two variables of interest, which in this case is my national income and my government expenditure. That becomes my mathematical model. In that mathematical model, I may want to include, so that in that mathematical model, you now have national income as a function of government expenditure. And there may be some other variables I want to include in my model. Do not just include any variable you like. There are two bases on which you can include variables. One, be sure that it is supported by one theory or the other, or you make reference to previous studies that have used it. So don't just arbitrarily begin to throw in variables in your model because you like them. No, it should be based on something, and that is why it's a research, it's scientific method. Okay, so I could say based on the work done by so and so, these variables will be included in the model. That is beautiful. Or based on so and so theory that specify this relationship with national income identity, I'm also including this other variable into that model. When you have done that, the mathematical model, you expected to have included all the variables you need in that model. Then in econometrics or statistical model, you now specify the fact that this your model is not deterministic in nature. Deterministic means A plus B equal to C. In econometrics or in statistics, A plus B is not always equal to C. All right, and that is why we add the stochastic variable. You justify why you are adding that stochastic variable in your model. And then the next thing is that you specify the expected signs based on theory or previous studies. What are the signs you're expecting after this estimation of your model? And then you justify why you chose that particular model you want to use. This is what you do in model specification. Then you now specify estimation techniques. What is the techniques you want to use? There are several techniques depending on the behavior of your variables. Okay, you may want to use OLS, but if you choose OLS, justify. You don't just pick it because you like it. It may be because others have found that it fits what you are doing. Make reference to them. You want to use augmented decafula autoregressive distributed like model, you justify based on the characteristics you found in your results. Maybe the preliminary test showed you certain character, you now decide to use ARDL, or you want to use VAR model of VEC or two-step, whichever, or you want to use a binary like probabilistic models like logit, stobit, or probit. You specify why and you justify it. This is basically what you do in estimation techniques. Whichever one you are choosing, you tell why you are using it. That is the justification. And then, how do you evaluate your results? You specify those basic tests, the preliminary tests you carry out, the statistical tests, and then the econometrics tests required. Okay, even pre-estimation tests you may need to do, you specify them here. And then after that, what next do? You describe your variable. Of course, if you already have the data you are working with, it may be nice to get a descriptive result of that data. Somebody may want to throw off that data to see how that data behaves in terms of minimum and maximum, in terms of standard, in terms of mean and standard deviation. So that could tell somebody the behavior of that data looking at that result. And then you describe where you got this data. It's possible the data set you are using were selected from different sources. Identify the sources for each of them. Is important because if, for instance, you are using unemployment based on Nigeria Bureau of Statistics and another person is using unemployment based on another organization, the measurement of unemployment for these two institutions or organizations may not be the same. And that is why you specify where you got your data from, so that in case there is variance from another variable from another organization, you are saved because you have indicated where you got your own. And that is why I stated here that as much as possible, be exact where you got your data from. On that note, I want to do a recap of what basic structure expected in your chapter 3. You do your theoretical framework. Now you know what it means. You do your model specification. You specify those model, your estimation techniques, and justify why you are using that techniques. And then method you are going to use and evaluate your result. Especially, how do you plan to test your hypothesis? State it clearly. State the decision rules for testing those hypotheses, and then you describe your variable and your data source. Thank you very much for joining in this discussion, and that is where we are stopping this. If you are interested in cross-sectional model method, for cross-sectional research, check the video on that note, and you will also gain knowledge. Thank you, and God bless you. Cheers.